This week, I thought we'd try something a little bit different. If you've been around my stream even a tiny amount, you know that I like to make digital sets to use with my green screen. And this past weekend, I had an idea for a cool new channel points reward that would require a fortune teller digital set. It looks a little something like this. So this week, we're gonna do sort of a cool behind the scenes time-lapse sort of deal, about 9 hours of work compressed all the way down to 15 minutes, to give you all a glimpse of the entire creative process. So without further ado, let's get started. My name is Chris Folea, I'll be your professor. Welcome to StreamSchool. So the first thing I do when I start any digital set is make sure that the position, focal length, and sensor size of my 3D camera match my real world camera. This ensures that the perspective of the 3D scene behind me matches my actual real me on stream. And I also add a reference image of myself so I can see what the composition looks like with me inside of it, so I don't put anything too important directly behind me. After that, I sort of start blocking everything out based on the general idea that I have, which in this case I wanted to make sort of like a fortune teller's house, maybe the kitchen or something, with these cabinets chock full of all sorts of cool jars and like fortune teller looking psychic props and things, which I ditched this completely later for the tent idea. But trial and error is part of the creative process, so I left it in the time lapse. And I spent a lot of time making this detailed cabinet. And note when I'm modeling these things that I model them to real world scale. So if you notice the video pause at all, it's because I'm looking up real world measurements for things. Because the best way to make something believable is to make it real world. At this point, I'm going back and forth in my head whether I want to do like the kitchen or like a fortune teller carnival tent. And I do end up settling on the carnival tent, but it was a real back and forth battle with myself. So I did mess with this a little bit longer, and then I started trying to do like a cloth backdrop, like a carnival tent. And I just couldn't get the cloth simulator to do at all what I wanted with the draping functionality. So I ended up, after this, after trying for a decent amount of time, I ended up trying to sculpt the cloth backdrop, which also just did not go well because I don't have a lot of experience sculpting fabric. I have about as much experience sculpting fabric as I do simulating it, which is not a whole lot. So after a lot of trial and error sculpting it and just realizing I could not get something that looked great, I did eventually end up trying to model this thing by hand, which is what hand modeling is what I ended up going with in the end. And this took a lot of trial and error as well, but looking at some reference images on Google on my second monitor, I was able to match it fairly decently just by moving vertices around using the soft select brush or using the soft select tool in Blender. And you notice I keep trying to bring that cabinet back in. Eventually I just completely get rid of it. Here, I go to Substance Source, which is Substance Painter's website for material resources to use in Substance Painter, and I find a fabric material, but I realize that I don't have Substance Painter installed because this is a brand new computer. I haven't installed all of my tools on it yet. But I take the fabric material I find into Substance Painter and export out a tileable version of it to bring into Blender, and apply that to the backdrop. I do some node magic to make it look more like sort of a felt kind of curtain, like a thick, heavy felt curtain. Then I want to have like a table for the crystal ball at this point. So I do a really basic table model with the legs so the cloth collides properly, and then I put a cloth tablecloth over it, which takes a lot of trial and error to get the cloth to drape just right. Then on top of that, we want to add a crystal ball, which I realized really quickly that the real-time rendering engine refractions aren't going to work great, so we end up going with sort of like a glowy crystal ball instead, which looks so much better, and have it cast light on the backdrop. It looks more magical too, in my opinion. And here I wanted to have some stars dangling in the background. My process for this is very scatterbrained, by the way. It's just sort of, what can I add next? What can I add next? What can I add next? Every time I finish something or get halfway through something, I'm just thinking, what can I add next? And I added sort of like this glitter sequence material so they catch the light in interesting ways when they rotate, because they are going to be animated. Then I wanted some tarot cards on the table. I did this with a picture from my cell phone. I just took a picture of a tarot card, took that into Photoshop to make a texture image out of it, and then put that on a plane in Blender. Super easy. Not hard to do at all. lots of tweaking, moving around, but at this point, I wanted to add a foreground to the digital set. Whenever you're working on a digital set, you want it to be 3 layers, not just you in the background. You also want stuff that goes in front of you because it just helps sell the scene that much more if when you're moving around, you go behind parts of the scene as well. This also helps add the entry point of my mic arm since my green screen's not super wide. And here I wanted to add some candles, which I sculpted some detail in, which you might want to retopo those if you're working on a game asset or something, but since I'm working on something super quick turnaround time, I don't really worry about retopologizing things. I just go with the high density poly counts, and it doesn't really affect me for small scenes like this. And at this point, I wanted to add an actual image of myself rather than just a reference image, so it renders out when I do test renders. That way I can see like a basic comp without touching the compositing nodes, just see what a basic render would look like with me in the scene when I render it out. And here I'm still just tweaking around and messing with things, doing some basic set dressing, moving things around, trying to fit things in place. Lots of tweaking all over the place at every step of the process. And here I wanted to work on this wooden shelf for the backdrop. Something that looks portable because you're in a carnival tent, and everything has to be motivated by the fact that we're in a carnival tent. This person moves around a lot. You need things that are easy to move, pack up, lightweight. And for this, I did basic box modeling, but the legs and the shelves, all of those were sort of, all of those were duplicated. I just modeled one of each. And then right here, I wanted different fabric for the table. Again, very scatterbrained, back and forth, but I wanted different fabric for the table, so I hopped over to Substance and got a new tileable fabric material. Here we worked on a jar for the shelves, and I unwrapped those. And right here, I'm straightening out the UVs in the slowest way possible. Like just this afternoon, I learned a faster way to do this. But after that's unwrapped, we take the jar over into Substance to texture that, which I love texturing individual objects in Substance. It's so much fun to give them sort of a story. Like, what is this? It's gonna have like this cool paper wrapper around it. It's gonna be all dirty. And since we're using the real-time rendering engine, we can't really do refractive glass, but we can make it look halfway decent. And all of that detail is going to be blurred out in the background anyway, but the small details do still help sell the realism of it. After this, we take this shelf that we modeled and I unwrap that and bring that into Substance. And I give this just a basic rotting wood texture. Again, this is going to be small in the backdrop. Just any texture variation and the right color will make it fit right in. It's also helpful that I made all of the wood grain facing the correct direction. Like you wouldn't have horizontal wood grain on a vertical pole like that. At this point, a lot of the remainder of the project is just adding more additional objects to the scene. Like I wanted to add some chairs to the table, just additional detail, and box modeling a chair, super simple. You'll notice that my chair doesn't match the reference perfectly, and that's okay. That wasn't the idea. I just wanted that picture of a chair to get a general idea of what a wooden chair looks like and the general correct proportions. Unwrap that, take it into Substance, and we texture this with 2 wood textures, one rotting underlying wood texture, and then one like harder, smoother wood texture, and then we blend the 2 using Smart Mask to make it look like it's worn on the edges. And then add another Smart Mask with another material to sort of just dirty it up even further, make it look kind of like a worn down chair, but it's not completely rotten and falling apart. Take that, throw a few duplicates of that into the scene, just add some additional detail. Then I figured a traveling fortune teller would also have some chests to carry their luggage with them. So I found a cool wooden chest on Google Images and decided to use that as a general reference. Again, references aren't supposed to match 100%. I just want to get a general gist of what to do here. And I modeled that. When I'm modeling these things, I model them at full detail, and I don't retopologize to a lower detail one for these small scenes. If I was doing a game asset or something, I would bake all of this high resolution detail down to a lower resolution model, potentially. But since this is a scene and it's a quick scene and it's super fast turnaround, I just model it all out, unwrap all of it, and shove it into Substance, and it makes it so easy to select individual pieces to apply materials to. And here you'll notice I used a second reference image for the lock, which when you're using references, it's okay to use multiple references for different parts of the thing. Like I wanted the general shape from the first reference, then I wanted to match the locking mechanism of the second reference. Just add more detail, unwrap the whole thing. You'll notice that I put the unwrapped bits in a separate hidden collection, so that when they're unwrapped, I know that they're unwrapped. I know what's unwrapped and what isn't. And once all of it is unwrapped and in the unwrapped collection, take all of those, merge them together, do one final unwrap, and then use UV Pack Master, which is a fantastic Blender plugin that packs all of your islands as densely as they can possibly go, just like that. Which you want your islands to be well packed so you get as much texture detail per each piece of the model as you possibly can in Substance. So we take this into Substance and we make sure that all of the wood grain is facing the correct direction. You really only need, since the islands are rotated in 90-degree increments, you really only need 2 wood textures, one rotated 90 degrees, just so we can make the wood grain face the correct direction on everything. Then add some nice leather textures to these straps and paint in some stitches, super easy. Some color variation for the outside and inside of the chest, and then add some planks using the basic Substance Painter stripes procedural texture. Just do some more texture painting, add some more metal. Notice again, since we didn't retopologize this and it's all a bunch of separate smaller objects, it is super easy to select each individual part to apply those materials to. Game Engine would hate me. Also add some dirt here. I add some dirt on almost everything I do that's not brand new, just because it ties all of the textures together. Throw those into the scene, do some set dressing. They're all rotated differently, so nobody will know the difference. Then I wanted to add some cloth draping over these, which I added some lower resolution collision boxes or hit boxes to make the simulation go faster. Then I wanted this to be like a cool floral lace design, but I took a while trying to figure out how to get the opacity exported from Substance Painter, only to realize that it was part of the base color. And then that just didn't look good at all. So I kind of gave up on that for a bit and moved along to mess with some other parts of the scene. And right here, I went into a separate scene and grabbed some books to throw around that I already had modeled. There is no reason to reinvent the wheel here since these sort of fit the aesthetic anyway. Then after some more set dressing, I decided I really wanted fabric, and I found a really cool opaque fabric material with no transparency that would work really well for this. And boy, oh boy, I did a lot of tweaking, simulating, tweaking, simulating, tweaking, simulating, tweaking, simulating, just over and over again to get it absolutely perfectly how I wanted it. And even after I thought I had it how I wanted it, still wasn't quite right, so I went back and tweaked and simulated even some more until I did finally get it how I wanted it. Then I added solidify and a subdivision surface to give it sort of like a rounded edge to give the cloth a little bit of thickness. Then we started messing with the comp a little bit to get the depth of field just right. At this point, I realized that the front pieces weren't detailed enough, so I wanted to add some wrinkles, but the bump texturing wasn't looking good enough with the noise, so I decided to add some actual displacement to the front pieces, which everything here is modeled to camera. You realize if you zoom out a little bit, those pieces don't make any sense at all. Everything is modeled just for that one camera angle, because that's all anybody's ever gonna see. Right here, I realized that the Bezier curves wouldn't unwrap properly for my uses for rope, so I decided to use some cylinders instead, just to keep it super easy. And I textured them before bending them. And right here, I wanted to animate some stuff. Again, very scatterbrained while I'm doing all of this. Just what can I do next? What can I do next? What can I do next? But at this point, I wanted to rotate and animate the stars and various aspects of the scene, being very careful to make sure that they looped perfectly at 10 seconds. So for instance, the stars could only rotate in 360-degree increments. So either 360 or 720 was about all I was gonna do. And then with the flames, I did some noise for the lights to flicker those and have the flames go up and down. A little bit more model detail in the scene. I just wanted like a cool psychic looking eye up on one of the shelves, just stereotypically, I guess. And right about there, we're getting close to finishing. At this point, I decided I wanted to make the crystal ball a holdout, which you'll notice I do to make it transparent so we can composite in. Oh, right. Here I decided to add some more detail to the crystal ball with these fish, since I'm the oracle fish. I added these little fish to the base of the thing and realized the solid color of the crystal ball just wasn't going to cut it in terms of detail, so I unwrapped all of that to take into Substance Painter to add more detail to. And when I take it into Substance Painter, you'll notice that I bring in the actual crystal ball as well. That's 100% just to bake the occlusion to the fish so that all of like the dirt buildup and stuff looks proper. I delete that copy of the crystal ball the second I get back into the scene. But add some really cool detail. I thought I'd add some eyes to the fish, but that just looked bad. Once I add that, the crystal ball base looks so much better. And then here is where I add the transparent holdout to the crystal ball, and I look for a stock animated stars resource that I had used previously, just to add to the crystal ball. And that's sort of what the final comp looks like. We hop back into After Effects, put it all together with better green screening, do some color correction, which I apply later as a LUT in OBS. And this is the final set. And this is me in the final set. If you found this video in any way, shape, form, or fashion even remotely helpful, or just enjoyed watching the process, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button below the video. And let me know in the comments if you like this format and want to see more stuff like this in the future. Also, just a friendly reminder that I am live every Tuesday, Friday, and Saturday at twitch.tv/oraclefishlive if you want to come check out my digital sets in real time. Until next time, my name is Chris Folea. Class is out.